And I know one of your hobbies is open water swimming.
Yes.
Would you like to talk a little bit about that and if Winona's a good area for that?
Well, it's, I would love to, because it's, actually Minnesota's a great area, but Winona as well. It's, I mean, I've always loved to swim. My dad swam in college, and even though I never swam competitively, I do now, and I took it up, and what I found was that swimming in a pool is so very different from swimming open water. Namely, you can't see the bottom, you don't know what's out there, you're in the middle of a lake, and even though you think, oh, it's daytime, there's people around, really, if there's a problem, no one's going to get to you, because it's just, you know, I mean, they're going to be 5 minutes before they can even swim to you, if you're lucky. And so it's the psychological challenge that I enjoy more than anything else. It's, I mean, you have to navigate. You just can't swim with your, you know, looking at the bottom of the pool. You know, there's no way to rest once you get going. In fact, just this past August, I was in a 2-mile open water swim in Lake Superior from Bayfield to Madeline Island. And we got there, the swim was on a Saturday, and we got there on a Thursday. And so I thought, well, I'll just go out and swim, you know, a couple thousand yards, which is kind of just over a mile, just to work the kinks out of the drive. And so I got out in Lake Superior, and I suddenly realized I'm in the middle of Lake Superior. I mean, it's, Lord only knows how deep. It's huge. There's boats, which I wasn't so much worried about, but there's stuff in it, you know what I mean? And it's like, I start thinking about the Edmund Fitzgerald, and I'm thinking about bodies coming up, and suddenly and then something brushes my leg, and it's like, you know, you have to control that adrenaline dump and not try to turn for shore and swim for all you're worth. Otherwise, you're really not going to make it. You're going to end up cramping up. And so it's that having to control the adrenaline, having to control that fear, and still continue swimming. It's different when you're with 300 people, but when you're by yourself, it takes a little more discipline. And I find that as I get older, I'm enjoying that psychological aspect of it more. But specifically here in Winona, in Goodview, they have the little lake there where the beach is in LeCaine Park, and that really is such a great lake to swim. It's not that cold in the summertime, and there's people there, but it's just a nice distance. It's always open. You don't have to worry about lifeguards, and then of course there's the TriNona, which happens in June in Lake Winona, which I don't necessarily recommend swimming in the lake because of the weeds, but that kind of adds to the overall enjoyment of open water swimming, which is you just never know what you're going to get.
Is there anything in general you'd like to add?
In general?
General.
Right.
Generally speaking.
Right. Generally speaking, what do I want to add?
Any other standout experiences of your life that you don't know about you?
Let's see. Law enforcement, English major, coffee, 5 kids. You know, I guess the only other one was traveling to the Republic of Georgia. You know, I just graduated from college, and what do all English majors do? They either go to grad school or they move back in with their folks. So I chose to go on an exchange program. God, I hope there's no English majors who are offended out there. So, right, or change your major quick. And so I ended up going over there on this exchange, which my college had just created, and then I get there, and I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia, and civil war breaks out the week I get there. The whole capital shut down. All the universities are closed. So I'm there for I was supposed to be there for a year. I'm there for 2 months with almost nothing to do, and I saw one American the whole time I was there. I was with this family, and yeah, people to speak English with, but it was really interesting being in a foreign country with no access to anybody to say, God, what do you think about that? That knows where you're coming from. And that was the interesting thing about it. There was nobody there who knew where I was coming from. And of course, this was in '91, so the internet was not. Telephone, you had to make a reservation at the post office to make a phone call days in advance. And then the mail, the whole 2 months I was there, I never got a single letter in. because the mail was so slow coming. All my letters made it coming this way, but I never got anything. So it was one of those times where you're sort of utterly isolated and you're having to, deal with that. And so it's, again, it's one of those where it wasn't necessarily a completely happy experience, but it really was interesting and informative.
What did you take away from that experience, would you say?
I think what I took away more than anything else was having to almost just sort of calm yourself down and say, okay, there's a great deal of control I don't have here. I can't, even just getting out of the country, I could not have navigated that, regardless of how good my Russian was at the time. I couldn't have navigated that on my own. There had to be people there, and the really sort of wacky thing is when they were making my plane reservations, were the family I was living with, the dad was standing there, and there's a crowd of people, and everybody's yelling at this one official, trying to get his attention, trying to get in there first to get their plane ticket. And it's like, well, how the hell do you do anything if that's how you have to go about it? I mean, how would I do this? I mean, how would I do this as a 22-year-old, kid from the States? It was, and so you just sort of have to let that control go. And when I was in the airport in Moscow, I realized at that time that this little really bad mimeographed piece of paper that I had gotten on my way in was really important, and that I had to have it to get back out of the country, and I didn't have it. And so this woman, this very kind woman who I'd never met, she was American, she was with a student group, put her arm around me and walked up and essentially sort of bullied the guard and made him believe I was part of this overall group and that my paper was in with everybody else's and I was able to get on the plane. And, when you think about what would I have done had she not been there? And you think, well, I guess it would have worked out. and especially with 5 kids, that's a really good attitude to have because you don't really have any control. Don't tell them that, but you don't.
It sounds like you've seen numerous communities as a whole. Can you, I guess, highlight, pull out extract the parts of the Winona community that stand out in your mind?
Yeah, here's the things I like. As a business person, I do business with a lot of different sized vendors, but I prefer to do business with vendors who I can talk to, with other businesses who I can talk to. And, today I went in, and I'm not going to say the business because I don't want to embarrass this woman, but I went in, I had forgotten to get some things, had forgotten to order some things which were delivered today. And I walked in and I sat down and we started talking and this woman says, she asked me how I was, and I said, well, how are you doing? And she said, I'm doing terrible. I couldn't find my bra this morning. And, she's probably 65 and I told her, well, I have an extra in the car, but, and she just looked at me funny. But, but it's those kinds of things which I love doing business in this size town because you can have those kinds of conversations and still do business. The other thing is when you are having difficulties, when every business has problems paying its bills from time to time, depending on how sales are, there's people I can talk to and say, listen, I can't pay you this week. And for the people to say, that's cool, can you pay me next week? Businesses have been done like that for thousands and thousands of years, but it's I think that big business is starting to get away from that. It's done by numbers, it's done by formulas, and to have that as a business person in Winona, and to have those kinds of relationships in Winona are so very important, and important to me because I love those sorts of interpersonal interactions, and I had a friend who was out visiting from Oregon, and every single place we went, I saw 1 or 2 or 5 people that I knew. And it's those kinds of interactions which keep me sane, keep me happy, and realize that I am part of this, this greater whole, which is really a cool thing to be. And I heard, the last person you interviewed saying that You know, it's great for him to have gotten out of that town, and, you know, I understand where he's coming from, and I'm glad I didn't grow up here because I probably would have left, but I'm glad to have come here. Because for me, it's not the river, it's not the bluffs. As much as I love them, I love being in them, it's the people, and it's the fact that I don't have to deal with traffic, and that it might take me an hour to get to the grocery store and get back home, not because I had to sit and wait for traffic lights or traffic, but because once I got there, I saw 5 people I knew, and I just couldn't stop talking to them. That's Winona for me.